In this video, we're going to look at the basic core elements that make up a web page. So that basic element or the basic document contains an HTML, head, title, body elements, and a doc type. Those are the ones that should appear in every HTML page. Now, you don't really have to have the doc type for it to be an HTML page, but it's important to include that because the doc type actually tells the browser what rules it needs to follow when parsing the HTML that you send for the user. The HTML5 doc type places the browser in a strict mode. What that means is that you have to follow the rules. You can't deviate from it. Will your page still work if you make a mistake and don't follow the rules? Yes. Would it validate as a well-formed, well-written document? No, it wouldn't. And that's important. So we want to make sure that we follow the rules as we go along, and we'll talk about those as time goes on as well. Transitional, or some people refer to it as quirks. The book actually refers to it as quirks. I prefer transitional. It just means the page may contain styling within the HTML and may use some depreciated tags. In a strict, there is no styling within the page itself. There is nothing in a page that says this type should be blue, it should be this size or that size. That doesn't exist in the strict. In the transitional, you could still have that, and you could use some tags that have been depreciated, like the font tag, which we won't even talk about other than me now mentioning it. The font tag was a tag where you could then describe the text that was inside of that element. And that would have been the color, the style, the font face, things like that. The frame set, which we're not going to be using in this class, and actually does not need to be used when you're doing an HTML5 document, but it was used when you used frame sets. And this is older versions of HTML. So we're not going to talk about frame sets in here, and even after you're done with this course, if you decide to do a frame set, and Blackboard, by the way, is done with frame sets, then you would want to use that particular doc type. And what do these doc types look like? Well, if you go to Blackboard and then go to course content, go down to week 1, and then go into module 1, down towards the bottom, there's the supporting materials and links. And inside of that, I actually have a doc type document for you. Now, this shows a couple different things. First of all, that which is on top would be for HTML 4.01. And you can see in here then that the first one is strict. The second one is loose, which is another term you'll see, but it is also referred to here as transitional, and the last one is frame set. So that's for the old HTML 4.01. If you were working in XHTML, you'd be using one of the three here. You'd be using strict, transitional, or frame set. So if you ever needed those, you have this document that you can keep for that. Of course, everything that we're going to be doing is going to be with HTML5. As you just saw, the doc type for HTML5 is simply less than an exclamation point and doc type, followed by a space and then HTML with a greater than symbol. There is only one tag. There is not a closing tag. This should always be the very first line in your code page as well. Shouldn't be a blank line ahead of it or anything else. This is the very first line in there. And then you have the HTML element. It has an opening and closing tag. This is the containing element for the entire HTML document. You'll hear that word document quite often, and what is between the HTML tags, part of the HTML element, is the document. The opening tag can have the attributes ID, direction, and language, which we just looked at a little in the previous video. The head element is the container for all other header elements. I'm not talking about header as far as headlines or things like that. I'm talking about other elements that belong in the head. And this head section, or the head element, it contains all the information that's used by a browser or a search engine spider to glean information, summary information, or other pertinent information about the document itself. So the head section is for browsers and search engine spiders for information about the document or information they will need, the browser would need, in order to parse the HTML for the user. One of the elements that is inside the head element is the title element. It should always be within the head element. The head element is a child of the HTML element and a sibling of the body element. So some of the links that you could, or some of the elements that you will see inside the head element are the base element, link element, style element, script element, and meta elements. And we'll talk about these throughout the term. The opening tag for the head element can also have the attributes ID, direction, and language. Based on our class coding standards, which is a document that hopefully everyone has read and will reread, you should also include page comments within the head section. This includes your name, the date the code page was written, and an abstract, or what is this page for? What is it used for? What's it do? You should also, as far as we're concerned in this class, I would always include the meta tag with the character set. And again, a meta tag has no closing tag. So it would be a meta, that's the tag, character set is the attribute, the value is UTF-8. So that'll become part of your template or all of your HTML documents that you create. The title element is used to specify the title of the page. It's a child of the head element and a descendant of the HTML tag. What is between the opening and closing title tags appears on the tab at the top of the browser when the page is active, and is also the default value when bookmarking the page. This is also used by search engines to help index the page. So what's between the opening and closing title tag should describe the content of the page or its site if it is your home page. Visitors should be able to determine what they will see on the page based on its title. It should include words that a user may use in a search engine. It cannot contain any other tags. And again, the opening tag could have the attributes of ID, direction, and language. Another element you will find inside the head element is a link element used for style sheets. So if you're adding an external style sheet, you would use the link element then and the href in order to incorporate that other file into the page that you're writing. And we're going to talk about style sheets later, so don't get too worried about this right now. But the href in a link just points to the file that you want to include, and you use a reference attribute, which is ref, to set the relationship. And the relationship of this link to the document is that it's a style sheet. In the example there, then, you see that, as well as the href looking in the folder of CSS. Inside that folder, it's looking for the main.css. Another element that can be incorporated inside the head would be a script element. We're going to talk about scripts later on in the course. The last 4 or 5 weeks of the course, we're going to talk about JavaScript, and you'll see this put to use then. But in this case, the source is where that file is. So in a sample here, for an opening and closing tag, the source is looking for the scripts folder and then the main.js file within that folder. And even though this does not have any content between the opening and closing tag, it must have the closing tag. And again, both the link and the script are found inside the head section. Now, that's the only place you'll find a link. As you'll find out later in the term, the script tag can also appear within the body. But that's a topic for the last 5 weeks. There's a lot of older browsers out there, specifically IE, because IE does not automatically update. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, they tend to all have their own updates and perform those updates as they come along. IE does not do that. It's up to you to find the new version and actually install that. Because of that, and because IE is the default browser of Windows, and many people use that and are not tech savvy enough to go out and find another browser, there are older browsers, older IE browsers, that are not compatible with what we're talking about and what we're doing with HTML5. So there is a JavaScript file out there. There is a JavaScript out there that is made public that you can use that actually helps with this. It's referred to as the HTML shiv. And all you need to do is, in the head section, include this in all your HTML page codes. There is also a modernizer library, just like the HTML shiv library. It actually includes the HTML5 shiv, but it also includes tests for emerging web features that you can use while building sites. It ensures that you're not trying to serve something up to the browser that it can't handle or it doesn't understand. And that's actually hosted at the same site, and this would be the script for that. Until we start running into the need for this modernizer within the course, your template page and all your pages that you turn in until that time will just have the HTML5 shiv code. Then we have the body element. This is where all the content that you want the user to see goes. So everything that the user is going to see now is in the body. The information that the browser uses to parse that is in the head. The body is a child of the HTML element, just like the head is, and it's a sibling of the head element. It can carry all the attributes from the attribute groups that we talked about in a previous video. Many of the elements that you'll be using inside the body element could be classified as headings, paragraphs, grouping elements, presentational elements, phrase elements, lists, and editing elements. And over the next 10 weeks, we'll be going through these. Actually, we'll get through these fairly soon in the next few weeks and then move on to style sheet, but you'll be getting a good look at most of these elements. So in one of your homework assignments, you're going to be asked to create a template that you could use for the beginning of every page, so you don't have to write some of this basic stuff over and over and over every time you start a page. So that template would include the doc type, then the HTML opening tag, then the opening header tag or head tag, your page comments, a title element, the JavaScript element with the HTML5 shiv reference, your closing head, your opening body, your closing body, and closing HTML tag. That's what really makes up your template. And you create that template so you can start with something instead of having to type all that stuff over and over again. When you get into more complex sites, You might have several templates that you use. Each one has the foundation of every page within a section of that site. For now, we're going to use a template to start it all off so that we've got the basic information there. The other thing that I didn't mention that should be there as well is the meta tag with the character set, making sure that it's using our standards for characters. That includes things like $ for money, things like that. The format that we use for time, formatting that we use for money. So those are the core elements. And your first assignment will be to create that template.